Hey, everybody, and welcome. Thanks so much for everybody showing up today. It looks like we've got 28 people signed up for our event with Boid. Of course, on the top right of my screen, anyway, is John with Boid, who is kind of the founder and CEO. We have, as well as Dan and Jamie, who have kind of come to join us today. I've got Senior Burrito throwing up the co-pilot seat. Just he's a bit of a tough one, so if anybody gets out of line, he's the one you got to deal with today. So anyway, I guess like to kick it off, I guess, John, man, I'm not going to drone on too long, but I first found Boid when you kind of first started talking about it. And I remember cruising the page and spending some time with the app. And I thought that it was a great idea then. I still think that it's a great idea now. And I remember playing with it. I got really excited about it. And it was kind of one of the things that I thought would hit mass adoption probably the fastest, due to the nature of kind of like what you guys are doing. And you're just essentially creating mining and data mining and using people's computing power to be able to solve complex problems. I guess, first of all, welcome. Why don't you kind of lead in with a little bit about yourself and how you found Boid, how you came up with the project, and where we're kind of heading from here?
Absolutely. Thanks, Matt. Pleasure. Yeah, Matt is one of our early adopters, very passionate about Boid from pretty much the day we released it. He was doing a lot of alpha testing with our application before anyone even knew about us. So it's really cool to talk with Matt about all this. But yeah, I've been working in the blockchain. So I've been building mining applications and kind of experimenting with different things for a while now. And Boid is kind of the culmination of everything that I've been building for the past few years. And the objective is really to make the kind of blockchain ecosystem accessible to a general audience, and not just in terms of monetary transfer, but in terms of actually participating in these networks. So mining, staking, things like that, trying to tap into the power of these communities. So I have a quick presentation I'm going to go through that explains how some of these things work.
Let's do it.
Okay. You guys can see my screen?
For now, I can still see you.
Not yet, my friend. Yeah, hold on here. Let me see if I can grant this screen. No, you should be able to do a share screen.
You know, I clicked share screen, but it doesn't seem to be sharing. 1 second.
When I hover over the share screen button, it tells me to install the share screen extension.
I haven't installed that.
Oh, it's all good, guys. This is like, as I was kind of saying to you, John, this is just, it's relaxed. It's like no stress. We figure it out, and we don't figure it out, then we'll just kind of let you talk about it a little bit.
Okay.
So it's not the end of the world. Everything's good.
Yeah. I'm trying to share, but it says it's sharing, but it looks like it's not. So.
I have a printer. Send me the slides, and I'll hold them up in front of my face.
We'll print them out, bro. Yeah. Where's that LaserJet printer? But I'm going to go through the kind of text content that makes sense. So basically, like my mission behind Boid is to make participation in blockchains and distributed computing networks accessible to a broad audience. And I founded Boid with a few core ideas. The first is that blockchains empower communities to quantify latent value. The second is that the value of a network comes from the community of participants who utilize it, not necessarily the underlying technology. And the third is that focusing on accessibility will bridge the gap between ideology and action. And what that means is that there's a lot of ideology in this space, but there's not a lot of action. And I'm trying to, if we focus on accessibility, it makes it much easier for people to act on kind of strong ideology that brought them into the space. So the solution is basically, we're trying to bring together what I call monetary incentives and social incentives. Monetary incentives is what you're familiar with from cryptocurrency mining. Basically, you put some electricity and hardware in, you get money out. And social incentives is basically what I'm talking. Social incentives is basically the kind of non-monetary computing contributions like SETI at home, distributed computing research projects. So these projects have been active for over 20 years with a massive amounts of computing resources with zero monetary reward involved. So I studied why people contribute computing resources for free to these projects, and I built a lot of those aspects into the Boid platform. So that's why you see the kind of teams and the gamification, the leaderboards, the competitive aspect. This is all meant to kind of tap into the innate tribalism of online communities. So this is really interesting because like a proof of work blockchains, it's all about just how much hash rate you have. But with a delegated proof of stake blockchain, it's all about community sentiment, really, is kind of how you, consensus of the network is consensus of the token holders. So because you're not relying on computing resources for consensus, network consensus, then you can kind of define what kind of computing resources that you want to reach consensus around. And generally, as human beings prefer useful work to not useful work. So by providing a platform where you can do useful computing contributions, we are making it easy for people to act on that, those values. And our platform has this thing called Boid Power, and Boid Power is kind of your like your hash rate on the network, and it's determined by the contribution of many underlying protocols. So you might have hard drive space, GPU, proof of work, scientific computing, and in the future we'll have hundreds of other integrated technologies. But you, as an end user, you don't need to worry about all this technology that's integrated underneath, because Boid Power kind of summarizes it all for you.
Yeah, just to simplify that, the one thing that really attracted me to the project was you are taking a lot of these things, and some of these things have a higher barrier to entry, right? Like your normal guy who walks in off the street doesn't really get blockchain. It's just kind of there. Maybe he wants to try out mining or wants to try distributed computing or some of these things or some of these applications that you're doing. You're taking a lot of the barriers to entry. You don't have to be tech savvy. You don't have to be some sort of genius. You don't even really have to know what cryptocurrency is. And you're just giving them an easy facet to be able to tap into it. You install an app, boom, you click the button and you're rolling. Have I kind of hit the nail on the head?
Yeah, no, that's, yeah, pretty much exactly. So this is like a great example of like me, I'm the person who invented this thing. So I'm trying to explain how it works under the hood. And Matt's just like, oh, you just push a button and it works. And I'm just like, yeah, there's a lot involved to make that happen. So that's exactly, that's exactly what I'm going for, really.
For sure.
Yeah. So
in order to breach, go ahead. Sorry.
So just to finish off what I was saying, basically, like Boid Power summarizes all this kind of underlying complexity, and the next step is what we call Boid Season 0, which is going to be our first season, and it starts on February 7th. And the idea behind seasons is that each Boid team has rewards for contributors based on how long they've been contributing to that team. And then those rewards can be determined by the team leaders. So they can say, I want to release a certain number of coins or non-fungible tokens or even physical rewards like t-shirts or hardware wallets. So as a user, you need to decide which team has the best rewards and or which team do I think is going to be in the top 5. Because the top 5 teams at the end of the season, at the end of 2 months, share in a very large prize pool. Additionally, we have this concept called the Boid Season Challenge, which is going to be announced on the day that the season starts. And the season challenge is one gigantic milestone for the entire network to reach. So it doesn't matter what team you're on, you still want the network to reach the network challenge. Because if the network reaches this milestone, everyone who's contributed during that season basically receives an airdrop from a very large prize pool. So we're kind of bringing together this kind of collaborative competitive concept that everyone likes in the EOS blockchain and taking it to 100 with scientific distributed computing. And we also launched mining pools, and we're working on proof of storage and things like that as well. So that's kind of what I wanted to go over. That's kind of the big picture of where we're coming from and where we're going. And I have a few people from the Boid team, Dan, Jamie, Eric, and Luke, and they're going to kind of go through their contribution to the Boid team lately, their background. And then I'd like to open things up for questions, and I would be happy to deep dive on any questions that anyone has about the Boid platform and the upcoming season.
Love it. So while we're going through kind of some of these introductions, guys, if you're watching, if there's anything that you want to know about the upcoming season, make sure you tap the Ask a Question button right there. It'll pop up. People can kind of like upvote which questions want to get asked first, and then we'll start talking to John. We'll start peeling apart this little onion, and we'll kind of go from there. So without further ado, I'm Dan. Do you mind opening up, buddy? Just talking a little bit about yourself, what your role is with Boid, and just kind of a little introduction.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yeah, sounds good.
Awesome. So my name's Dan, and I am the community manager for Boid. And I'm also going to be the director of marketing for the marketing initiatives that we're having coming up in 2019, where we're really going to try to expand the user base of Boid. Right now, the majority of our users come exclusively from within the EOS ecosystem. Most people found out about us because of the airdrop, and I'm trying to open the scope of that up quite a bit. Like you mentioned earlier, Matt, it really is super simple to get started with Boid. I've got a few of my family members that are like really close to what you'd describe as computer illiterate. Like they still use the installable AOL application to browse the web and to check their mail. But they're also running Boid on their computer right now. And I just, so far I've been going through and creating little accounts for each person and saying, teaching them, here's what a secret key is. You need to write this down on a piece of paper and keep it somewhere like where you keep your super secret documents that you don't want anybody to know. You're going to need this. It's kind of your password to your money. And really that's the hardest part is learning the EOS ecosystem versus using the actual application. So that's kind of what I got involved with Boid because, I was in EOS, the Boid airdrop happened, and I'd found out about some of the different dApps that allowed staking for different types of bonuses, and Boid came up on my radar for doing research for that kind of stuff. So I started digging into it, and I found out like the whole distributed computing for science thing, and I ran SETI at home on my computer for almost 10 years with zero reward whatsoever. And then I was like, wait, I could have been getting paid for this. So yeah, actually I got really heavily involved. I'm trying to participate as much as possible. I've got, I think I've got the largest, account within Boid right now, because I've got a whole bunch of mining machines set up that are just, processing data for good. And I'm trying to grow the community as best I can. My company, I come from the XRP community, actually. Boo hiss, boo hiss. But my company does a lot of work in the payment space, and we're going to be integrating a technology in the coming years with Boid that allows Boid to pay out in multiple different currencies using interledger technology. So you'll be able to receive Boid or Ethereum or EOS or XRP or Bitcoin or whatever you want to. And that's going to be coming later on in the year. So that's a bit about me. If you got any more questions, send them in the chat, and I'll be in there, and I'm going to drop out unless somebody's got some questions right now.
I've got a super quick one for you. Of course, we talked about kind of your main focus, I assume, is going to be diversification of these other secondary markets and tapping into kind of previous markets where Boid might not have been accessible, or at least the things that Boid do might not be accessible, which is in essence the beauty of Boid, right? I want to know a little bit about kind of how you plan on accomplishing that. And I also understand that you have like a pretty interesting previous history that I think is that's interesting. Were you not in the military for a long time, Dan? Was that kind of
the military was my first job. I was in the Army for almost 10 years. I didn't do a whole lot of IT work for them until the very end, but that's kind of where I got started. And my co-founder of Secure Blockchains, my other business, he's also a vet, and we went to college together. So I was totally against cryptocurrency until like a year and a half ago. I thought it was stupid. The only thing that I knew about it is that people were throwing tons of money into these super speculative investments that had no foundation. So I didn't want anything to do it. And my buddy twisted my arm and said, no, you need to look a little bit more at the word blockchain instead of Bitcoin. And I looked at blockchain and I figured out that there's so many different use cases besides just gambling. Even though gambling is a really good use of blockchain, and not the like Bitcoin gambling, but like the dice gambling or the bet dice. Those are really interesting use cases that are just really exciting about blockchain. And then look what we're doing here with Boid, where you're able to use your hardware that you've got sitting around your house. Like my mother-in-law turns her computer on for an hour a day to play around on Facebook. Well, now she leaves it on 24 hours a day, and probably, hopefully by the end of the year, it would have been a free computer because she'll have earned enough Boid tokens to justify the electricity and the hardware. And that's where I envision blockchain going, to where it's invisible to the user. You don't need to know all this stuff with crazy key management. You don't need to go, like, the experience should be as easy as it is with Boid. You don't need to go into the command line and run a bunch of crazy stuff. You can just install the wizard and log in and go. And that's really, I think, probably been one of the greatest barriers to entry so far, is that we've been limited to just the EOS community for members that want to come in. But with like what Lynx is offering, with like double click Face ID on your iPhone, and now you've got an EOS account, that's making it a lot easier for us to onboard clients. So we're looking in the gaming community. So like streamers that have big workhorse computers and have a lot of followers that play games. We're going to be reaching out to them to try to build Boid teams that exist within different gaming communities. Maybe other industries where people might have stronger computers, like the video editing industries or photo editing industries, where there's communities online that people get together and share advice. Those are going to be some of the areas that we're trying to target people to use Boid, and bringing great exposure to the EOS ecosystem at the same time.
For sure. That's great. It's definitely the questions answered.
Right.
I appreciate it, Dan. And I'm sure you guys are going to continue to accomplish what you guys want to accomplish. That's, to me, is one of the most interesting things about what you're doing, is getting people who might not otherwise be involved in blockchain, cryptocurrency, providing them with a medium in which they don't need to know much. Sign in, good to go. You're onboarding people to the EOS ecosystem. I love it, man. Thanks for dropping in.
Before I close the video, and I'll be over in the chat, if anybody has any ideas for me where you think there might be a concentration of people that have high computing power that have nothing to do with cryptocurrency community or something like that, give me some ideas over in chat. I'll be there. See you guys.
Love it. Thanks, Dan. See you. Okay, and on to the man in the middle, Mr. Jamie. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and some of the roles that you have with Boid?
Yeah, okay. I guess, well, my background prior to cryptocurrency, I've been involved in crypto for about 9-10 years now. Background prior to that is a kind of chartered buyer, project manager working within IT, an IT-related field. Focusing on crypto, I've been mining cryptocurrency since probably 2009. Started with the original Bitcoin rigs and all the other stuff. Migrated through to GPU and then ASIC mining and FGPA mining. So I've got a great deal of experience in the mining side of things. In terms of specific experience, I've been involved in about 4 or 5 DPoS communities, ranging from building the community through to developing use cases, and also working on actually managing the coins themselves. So by that, I'm talking about actually developing updates to the core, the blockchain, and so on. More recently, I've got involved in POS coins, so I'm working for about 4 or 5 different coins currently, and then more recently, within the last 3 or 4 months, started to get involved with Boid. Recognize that obviously creating greater access and ease of access to some form of mining is probably the key to this. You know, GPU mining, FGPA mining, they all require a certain level of technical understanding. And the average Joe probably doesn't want to know, if I'm honest. As you say, they'd rather just install an app, point, click, and it's running. You know, you connect it to your EOS account and away you go. Specifically in terms of what I'm doing for Boid at the moment, I've been working on setting up the mining pools in the background. So at the moment we've got an ETH Classic and a Raven Boid pool, for want of a better term. So really those have just been set up, configured, we're testing, we're managing the kind of payment processes and making sure they work as they should. I think as they've been developed and enhanced, gotten to the point where we're happy, then I think that will become more of an official part of what Boid is planning to do. Outside of that, the only other thing I'm working on at the moment is looking at proxy voting, and how we, Boid, can influence or interact with proxy voting. So for me, that's been a bit of a steep learning curve, because coming from DPoS similar in some respects. You have a set of delegates, and those delegates are voted into an active position by voters. And that if they don't deliver on what they're supposed to be doing, they drop out of active forging position. So I think I can draw a similarity between the way EOS works and the way normal DPoS coins work. The difference appears to be that you have a proxy that basically can manage your voting on your behalf. So I've spent some time getting my head around how that works. And I think one of the things John mentioned earlier, which I think is an interesting development, and I think a positive development, is the proposal to move to one vote via one account. So dropping the whole 30-to-1 ratio. The reason I think that's very important is if you look at some DPoS coins like Lisk, for example, if I have 101 delegates, I can vote using my weight 101 times. So effectively what it does is it kind of multiplies the weight of the system by 10 times for no real reason. And it also creates, I don't like this word, but it's probably a good word to use. It kind of creates a cartel, because effectively they control those top 101 delegates. And therefore, if the network decides it wants to progress a change through that network, and those delegates, the cartel, decide they don't accept that change, then the change doesn't happen. So what that can do is then slow down the progress of the core and its developments and updates and advancement. So actually moving to a one vote, one wallet system removes cartels. It means that the block producers have to be more dynamic in terms of their proposals and delivering on those proposals. And again, using ARC as an example, where it does use the one vote, one wallet system, it means that if a delegate doesn't deliver, or a block producer in this case, they drop out of active forging position within minutes. Now, if you apply that same risk to Lisk, so someone hasn't delivered, it can take weeks or months for that delegate or block producer to drop out of forging position. So what this does is it creates a much more, in my view, a much more dynamic system that is based on activity rather than complacency, because they're already in that block producing position.
I agree with you, Jim. We don't pull punches around here. We talk about cartels. You call a spade when you're talking to me. So I mean, whatever. I'm not going to get into it. But there's a bunch of people, 21, and I sure as hell don't know who they are. So whatever. It is what it is, man. Last question for you before you take off. I want to ask you, what gets you passionate? Like, what gets you excited about this thing? What really drives you to wake up, meet up with John, make things happen, and keep yourself going? What's like the driving the driving passion
The
behind all
driving
this for you?
passion is an overall passion, and it's a passion for cryptocurrency and blockchain. And the reason is the press and the real world don't view cryptocurrency or blockchain positively. It's constantly bashing Bitcoin and all the other cryptocurrencies that exist for edge cases that become popular news. The key for me is actually ease of adoption, which John has absolutely nailed, which was one of the big attractions for me, because some of the other cryptocurrencies I'm involved in, you've got to have a PhD in quantum physics to figure out how to get the thing running. With Boid, as I said, it's a case of download, point, click, link your EOS account, and away you go. So succinctly, it's about ease of use. And I think the thing that really attracted me to Boid and to work with Boid, and John specifically, was that ease of use and the aim for mass adoption.
I love it, man. That's brilliant. It's an absolute pleasure to have you on and to chat with you a little bit. And thanks for stopping by. No, pleasure is all mine. Eric, man, how are you?
Hi.
Thanks for stopping by. Can you talk a little bit about yourself, what you do with Boid, and what drives you behind kind of the project?
Yeah, sure. Can you hear me all right?
Perfect, buddy. Yeah.
Gotcha. All right, cool. Would it be all right if I commented on something that Jamie was talking about first? That I thought was really interesting was his analysis of how like a delegated voting system would work. I recently read this article by Vitalik Buterin on why proof of stake is a good idea. And he mentions that cryptography has historically been this like battle that heavily favors the defender in the battle, and that people who want to like become spiritual successors to the early like punks of cryptography should continue to promote systems that heavily favor the defender, and moving away from a delegated voting system where like someone can build a cartel and sort of like surround themselves with things where it's like very easy to come in and gatekeep and destroy things that exist currently, are kind of like against that idea. So I think it's interesting that EOS is getting to that point now, but they haven't been there in the past. Anyway, I wanted to say that. I thought it was really cool. Yeah, so I am going to introduce myself and talk about some of my Boid involvements. And
cool.
I would really like to hear some questions, actually, because I do a lot of technical work. I'm the technical lead at Boid.
Nice.
And this is like a very common thing for technical people. Like when John was giving his presentation earlier, and the first question that you asked him was like, okay, cool, how can we simplify this? And if that very valid, like it's a little weird to think about it, but it takes so much context to be in that state of mind where like the entire project of Boid or Boink or whatever, it makes sense to the specific person who spent those months and months and months figuring it out. But in a sort of general way, like to have that all pouring out of a person at once doesn't make sense. So anyway, I would love questions. I am an engineer. I got my engineering degree from the University of Maryland. I studied aerospace engineering, but I noticed that one of the biggest problems with my lab that I worked at was that there were just tons of people who would like sit around and use their computers all day, and wouldn't be able to like collaborate with each other on their computing resources or anything like that. So just like fundamental improvements like use of GitHub would help, or use of like cloud services would help, or there's some really great, like if you know anything about computer aided design, there's some really great like cloud-based computer aided design that completely takes away the all the mess of doing like rendering and like solving complicated physics problems on the actual computer itself. There's this one quote that I really like from a coworker of mine who was one of the most brilliant people that I ever worked with. He said, in response to one of his advisors who asked him, why don't you get involved with computational fluid dynamics? He said, well, a computational fluid dynamics problem typically takes 1 month to solve. If I live until I'm 80 years old, then I'll live for about 1,000 months. So if I want to, I can solve one problem every month. And for every problem that I solve, I'll be spending 0.1% of my life solving that problem. And is that really how I want to measure like my life, is by solving these very complicated problems in very small increments? And then you've solved a few of them and you've done a little bit and then you're done. So that's why Boid is so cool to me, is because like everybody's just always has their computer in their pocket or like sitting at home and not doing anything. And or they're like struggling on their own desktop computer to figure out like some problem that they're really not equipped with the tools to solve. But if we had a tool that was easy enough to just like point, click, install, submit whatever program you want in sort of an arbitrary way, it would have really strong implications for the scientific computing community. Yeah.
I think you nailed it. I'm actually really feeling what you're saying, because you're basically saying that you can use a community, like, you know, one man alone is an island, but when you start to get people involved, and even you're able to pull resources from people who wouldn't traditionally be involved in something like, you know, typical the possibly have in the world, and like some of these complex problems, because some of these complex problems are important. Like, what are some of the things that potentially the computational power is going to be used for? We're not talking about like how many bristles should I put on my toothbrush. We're talking about like real world shit and real things that can actually make a difference. And by I swear sometimes it's me. And you bring in a bunch of people together who might not have access to this, and you're doing real things, and you're creating a community based around doing real things. What are some of the problems that Boid could potentially be used to solve?
Well, so I'm going to address that, but I wanted to say before going into the actual problems that there is a giant like effect that the community of people can have on the success or like the overall like growing output of a scientific computing network generally, like Boid or Boink or whatever.
Yep.
But there's also, it would, I think, be like impertinent to ignore that there's a gigantic community of old or new unused computers that's being ignored too. And it's like overwhelming to think about the amount of computers that are not used. But so some of the problems that could be solved, well, right now we've been looking at some National Institute of Health grants to collaborate with problems in the medical community. And the medical community is a really important one, for one thing. And also they were some of the very early adopters of like sort of virtualized distributed methods of scientific computing, because they recognize that like the human body is such a complex, high degree of freedom system that any of these problems, you know, like you take a strand of DNA or whatever and you try to figure out like what mutations would it have, or like what does this particular sequence predict about, you know, some trait of the body. It can't feasibly produce research within like that 6 months to 1 year time frame that researchers need in order to like continually churn out papers if they do it all on one computer. So let's see, I am struggling a little bit on the names. It's called like phytokinesis or something, which is the process of predicting the like protein that will be created from a catalyst, anyway. It's like it's basically like folding at home. Yeah. Which is the buzzword for the Boink community. But so we're looking into those sorts of projects and reaching out to universities that we will be able to collaborate with, who will know the names to those things. so that we can give them what we have, which is an easy to work with, easy to install, and like method of translating, but also creating community behind a scientific computing resource. And then they can give us what they have, which is like the actual problem. And another one, which I just want to mention because it was a part of my research group for a while, is what's called finite element modeling, which you take like a mechanical structure and then you solve like a 1 billion by 1 billion like linear matrix equation to try and figure out like what are the dynamics of that mechanical system at a particular point in time. And there's huge implications of that in pretty much all fields of engineering, like structural engineering, if you want to figure out how a building is going to move over time, or like what's its fatigue cycle. Aerospace engineering specifically, I did a lot of work with helicopters, stuff like that.
Yeah, that's cool, man. My stepfather was a test pilot. But essentially, like what you're saying is that, I mean, like we can find, genetic sequencing genomes that might prevent or create, certain links to certain diseases. We can predict the way that the galaxy moves. We can figure out important engineering calculations in order to be able to build safer, better buildings. Like these are all the possibilities that this stuff kind of encapsulates for like the common man. And you don't have to be a hyper genius to hop on your computer and run a bunch of complicated software. You can turn on this one little application and boom, you're making a contribution to society. And I think that that's why it's cool. That's one of the main driving reasons why I've supported
It's
John's.
honestly that simple.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like people like doing good stuff. This is a great example of that.
I love it, man. I love it. And I love your attitude and I love your passion too, man. I can see that you're a good guy. So hang out for a little while, Eric. I appreciate your time, man. Thanks so much for showing up. And we'll make sure we get some info on you in the next little while.
All right, cool. I'm going to turn my camera off for now.
Sounds good, but hang out. Don't go too far because I'm sure we'll get some questions.
Yeah, I'll be in the chat. If there's something I can address, I'll be right there.
Sounds good, brother. Nice to meet you. Okay, so Mr. Heater, are you there? Was there somebody else you wanted to bring on screen before we kind of hand it over and start picking up some of the questions, buddy?
Yeah.
Anybody else you wanted to bring up?
If you could get Luke up here. Luke and Eric have been working together for a long time.
Sounds great. Are you there, Luke? Can you give us a little? There you go. He's accepted. The screen is full. So I'm going to pull that off and try one more time. Okay. There we go, buddy. You should be ready to. Please remove a seat if you want to add another one. It's making me. I got to kick one of your guys, man. I'm sorry, John. It's got to go. Jamie, I'm sorry, man. Don't hate me. I'll bring you back on. Done. Luke, you're in. Boom. Okay, so I've just invited Luke. Sorry, Jamie.
Hello.
All right, cool.
How's it going, guys?
Good, man. How are you?
I'm glad to be part of this interview. It's very interesting, all the conversations so far. So I guess about myself, I went to University of Maryland as well. I was a mechanical engineer. I minored in comp sci, that's how I met Eric. And we worked at the Rotorcraft Center together doing like the helicopter work he described. And we were doing a lot of machine learning work, trying to use machine learning to fly the aircraft. And we used specifically reinforcement learning, and it was very interesting, but I guess we're not going to talk too much about machine learning for this interview.
Well, why not?
I mean, if you want to, like we used reinforcement learning for that, and then after that, I was a data scientist at another startup, and I did a lot of machine learning work there on analyzing like financial data and all sorts of other like who-is data, and I was tasked with like making this visual representation of the blockchain, and this is what initially drew me into not just day trading cryptocurrencies, because beforehand I would write a lot of like algorithmic trading algorithms that used a bunch of statistical methods that I thought of myself, that I read about online. That am I laggy at all, by the way? Can you hear me effectively?
I can. You broke up a little bit, but it's not the end of the world. You're still speaking fluently.
Okay, cool.
Good. So yeah, let it roll.
Cool. So yeah, I was really, really big into algorithmic trading for a while.
Nice.
And originally with stocks and then with cryptocurrencies on mostly Poloniex for a while. And it was really fun. But I never made any algorithms that made me a millionaire, if you're curious about that. But once I learned how Bitcoin truly worked and like how blockchains truly work, I was like, wow, this technology actually has the potential to decentralize wealth in society. And that's like why I'm attracted to blockchain in general. And whether it's proof of work, proof of stake, proof of however you reach a consensus without one person, like that is the real power of it. And what I really like about Boid especially is the ease of use. And that's why I was originally attracted to it. And Eric introduced me to it, and I read a bunch of documents that they had on it, and I just really liked it because of that. And I guess for probably like 3 or 4 months now, I've been helping a lot with the smart contract for the staking of Boid, which we just announced and John talked about, which was really interesting. And there's going to be some more updates that I'm currently writing, that I have written, and some more I still have yet to write, that are going to make staking even easier to do.
I love it. It seems to kind of be the central theme with Boid. Take really complicated things and make them easy. I like it. That's one of the main reasons why I like Boid.
Definitely.
I would say I'm more technical than the average bear, but I'm far from a programmer. And of course, like Boid has come such a long way too. Like I did like some of the initial testing, but again, I keep saying it, but it's why it's why I've always been interested in Boid. You guys are making things accessible, which allow people to participate in this microeconomy that can kind of like help the world, and you're making it easy. Like grandma doesn't need to know how to go out and mine, Gridcoin or use her computer for computational data, or even her phone. You want to throw the application on your phone, you push a button, and you're getting some rewards, and you're making a contribution to society. And I think, like kind of as we spoke about with Dan earlier, it really boils down to being able to make this accessible to people like grandma and to people who are, just kind of maybe getting into cryptocurrency. And I think it's also cool because it's really kind of, it starts to open up the rabbit hole. And actually Gordon does a really good piece on down the rabbit hole every Sunday, but it really does start to open the rabbit hole and allow people to realize that blockchain can really be used to solve some important like world life problems. And it's funny because I come from the same background where I was all about like Moon, Lambo, when's my Ripple going to go to $10, because I didn't understand market cap. But it's really, for me, it's really taken a change. And EOS was kind of, the use of smart contracts and a lot of the stuff that you're speaking about is really what dragged me in and why I've kind of been here. So I really like that, man. What would you say, Luke, is the number one thing that gets you up every day, gets you excited about Boid, and gets you like plowing ahead?
I guess sort of just like I said, the decentralization of wealth in society, or not just wealth, but like decision making and all the potential blockchain has to offer society. But like you said, it has to be easy to adopt. It has to be easy to use. 99%, not 99, maybe like 90+% of people are not technically savvy, and they don't ever want to be. And I definitely remember when I was, before I became an engineering student, I hated computers. I was like, this is so frustrating, like the slightest little thing. So I definitely vibe with the things need to be easy. Things need to be like effective to use and stuff like that. And just, the effect it has on society.
Yeah. I love it, Luke. I think we're all kind of here for the same reasons, right? And we're all just kind of working together and putting our heads together to try to make them all work and then try to make them better. Because you can throw things on blockchain, but if it's not better than something that's currently existing, you're wasting your time. And there are no current opportunities being seized to make what you guys are doing accessible to the common man, which is why I love the project, which is why I, sir, salute you and appreciate you coming on to chat a little bit.
Yeah, that's why I like it too. Thank you.
My pleasure, man. We're gonna bring John, hang out for a little while. We're gonna bring John back on, and then I think the plan is just to kind of go to questions and get some people involved, and hopefully there will be something there which we can get kind of you and the team to chew into. So, Mr. Heater.
Sounds good. Yeah, any technical questions I can hopefully answer.
You bet, my friend. Well, why don't we open that up then, John? Was that kind of the intention, man? We'll open it up and see if anybody's got any questions they want to ask. John's in a space-time continuum, which is cool.
Yeah, I think that's kind of like I did the big picture, and then everyone else is kind of deep diving into what they're focusing on specifically. So I would love to open up the floor to have a conversation, and I have no problem going into more detail about things that people are interested in. Do you want to pick a question for us, Matt, or?
Do I ever? What I will notice, John, is that you've come a long way pretty quickly. Like some of these guys who you have on your team are well, all of them are much smarter than I am. So I think that whatever you're doing well. These guys, it looks like you've got a pretty solid technical team who've been involved in some pretty big things.
Yeah.
So it looks.
It's good that you said that because this is my advice to people that are trying to build a team, trying to build something. I've been trying to build up the Boid team for a long time. I've had a lot of people kind of come and go on this project, and what I found was that when I stopped looking for people and just focused on building the right things, then the right people find you. So that's what the people you're talking to today are the people that found me and stuck around, and they're the right kind of people that you want on your team for sure.
I love it. Yeah, it seems like they're all highly skilled, highly intelligent, technical people, which is of course something that you want when you're doing a technical blockchain startup. So let's we're going to go to the first question on the list, and this is actually asking, looking at the road ahead. Can you expand on what blockchain protocols you guys are looking at?
So we actually, Jamie actually just set up Ethereum Classic and Ravencoin mining pools for us, and those are going to be integrated into the Boid app probably sometime next month if everything goes as planned. So you'll basically be able, if you have a GPU on your computer, you'll be able to hit a button and you'll be proof of work mining. I'm also working with a decentralized video distribution platform about hosting videos for them using an IPFS swarm. So when you run the Boid app, your excess computing or your excess hard drive space will be shared as part of this distributed video network, and you'll be incentivized based on your contribution there. That's a little bit more of a longer horizon. Probably before June or something, we'll have a alpha of that working. And there's a few other protocols that are there's a lot of these distributed decentralized computing projects that have been around, and we've been watching a few of them to see if any of them make sense for integration into Boid, because Boid is very like cross blockchain, cross protocol. We're not trying to build like this proprietary thing that locks everyone out. We want to build something that taps into the network effects of all these different projects and creates, much more value than any single one of these projects could do alone. And also, Luke and Eric are focused on our own science projects as well. So we'll be able to run. And right now we connect to World Community Grid, but we're going to have our own distributed science projects before the end of the year.
Okay, we have another question here, which is asking, when can we expect Supernode? Can you tell us more on how it will participate in the Boid network? Will it require Boid to run its own chain? That was from Captain Buff.
Right. So the Supernode is basically a way for me to incentivize people that provide useful data into the Boid network. So right now, my server is kind of like an oracle that connects with all these different networks. But the ideal is that we have a network of hundreds, thousands of these Boid supernodes that have staked tokens, and they run infrastructure. They run blockchain nodes, they run mining pools, they run Blink servers, and they all come to consensus. They all check each other, for one thing. So each one is constantly checking the other for accuracy. And also they check the user's devices. So they say like, well, this device did this work on this day. Does everyone agree? They all come to consensus. And I'm a really big fan of like just straight problems, like solve the problem instead of starting with a solution, start with a problem and work your way backwards. So the super node is the best way for us to solve that problem today. Is that going to change in the future? Maybe we'll have a better method of doing that. It's possible, but that's kind of our roadmap right now. And probably before the end of the year, anyone will be able to, set up their own node on the Boid network and get incentivized for providing infrastructure support.
Very cool. Will that infrastructure support, will that come in Boid payments? Essentially, would that be like the reward for?
Yeah, it would be part of the inflation reward, similar to the block producer pay.
Cool, I like it. Okay, we're going to move on to another one. We have Nick, who wants to know, when can we expect other causes to generate power for to be added to the Boid leaderboard?
So right now, we just for the sake of simplicity, we have everyone focus on the same project. Adding more projects in that are part of World Community Grid, they have about 6 or 8 different projects you can choose from. So adding more of those is actually not very difficult for us. It's more of just an interface, user experience type of thing. But we are open, like if users reach out to us and say like, hey, we would really like to contribute to this project specifically and earn Boid power for that, then I would definitely consider integration.
Cool. I like it. All right, we have another one. What is John most excited about in relation to our development roadmap? And that is asked by your own man, by Dan. So what are you most excited about, John? Like, what's the thing that really hypes you up about the future of Boid?
Oh man, there's so many things. Probably
what's the one?
Yeah, probably the number one thing would be. So when I originally designed Boid, I designed it with the assumption that I would be running it on people's computers that did not understand cryptocurrency. What I found when I released it was that the EOS community just jumped on board immediately, way faster than I expected. And now probably 90% of the users are from the EOS community. So that's kind of changed or at least guided our development to some extent. So we've been less focused on accessibility and more focused on the kind of crypto economics side of things. But I would really like to get back to accessibility and breaking into the PC gaming space. And I think that if we can prove that this whole platform can scale to people that don't even know what a blockchain is, then we've really proven that this thing is going to work. And I have like complete confidence that it's possible. It's just a matter of time and energy. And that's actually something that Trybe is going to help us with, because Trybe is just kind of like a generic blogging site that happens to be, blockchainized, right? So I think that, by expanding Boid marketing out into these other sectors, that is going to be the key for growth this year.
100%. Like we had a conversation last time. We had Pixios on, right? And I think that like when you can create something, and that's what you guys are doing, when you can create something, something weird going on with my head. Anyway, when you can create something that is outside of it appeals to the masses, not just the guys like you and I and your team. We're excited when we hear about like, hey, this is VRAM, or hey, this, or like, or there's a new staking protocol, or they're creating a new layer on EOS that's going to boost CPU. But the truth of the matter is that most people don't give a crap about this stuff, and you want to appeal to most people. And I think that your product is doing that by taking something that's very complicated, dumbing it down into this nice little easy to use application. And you're using it's not just like, hey, you can make crypto. It's like, hey, you can use distributed computing power to do some real things and possibly even change the world. That's one of the things that motivates me. But in order to do that, you do have to bring it to the masses. And hopefully Trybe will be able to help you guys with that. I think you see the need for that. Larimer, I keep going back to this, but Larimer himself, for the most successful applications, are going to be the ones ultimately that can kind of mask the element of blockchain. You've got to do something better than what's going on outside, and you've got to make it easier. So I totally get your roadmap. It's a really good one. Now, post rant, let's move on to the next question. Gary Hughes wants to know, I hear myself there, can we see a previous Boid contribution per day on a historical basis?
Hey, Eric, could you mute your microphone?
Yeah, sure.
Could you restate the question, Matt?
You betcha, my friend. So Gary Hughes wants to know, can we see a previous Boid contribution, it's perfect, per day on a historical basis?
Yes, I know I've been saying it for a while, but all the transactions, all the contributions, every single time I update your Boid power, I have a giant list of every single update for every single account. It's just a matter of building an interface that displays that information and is also secure so that it's only accessible to who it's supposed to be accessible to. So it's definitely a priority. It's just other things get in the way. But yeah, so the first step is going to be basically a breakdown of each transaction. So like, okay, cool. So this transaction that I got 30 minutes ago, 10% of it was from the team, 40% of it was just my base mining reward. 10% of it was like some extra bonus thing because I was here at this time. So yeah, that's the next step.
Very cool. And the next question came from my friend here, Biba, who is a pretty intelligent gentleman himself, who's asking, what are some of the current challenges with decentralized computing bond faces? I don't even know what that is. That's how smart he is.
Can you say the last part again?
Bond faces? I'm reading it. Yeah.
What are some current challenges with decentralized computing bond faces? Boid faces.
Oh.
Sorry, Biba.
Wow, that was interesting. We all assumed he knew something we didn't.
Bond.
I think that's a problem.
Okay, so this is the thing. I'm going to rant about this a little bit. This is the thing that most of these existing decentralized distributed computing platforms, this is the hurdle that they have to solve. If you want to do some kind of computing on some data, you need to decrypt that data in memory and run it through the process in order to get the result. If you're decrypting data in memory, then whoever has physical access to that machine can read that data. So there's all kinds of security issues around that. And that's why you might, there's several of these decentralized computing platforms that have been live for like a year, and they have almost no participation because the security concerns are so high. However, you look at like the distributed scientific computing projects, and the security concerns are much more lax because a lot of the data is already publicly accessible anyways. A lot of it is publicly funded, so they're required for the information to be made public anyways. So basically this is kind of like a niche where we are focusing 100% of our efforts because it's the only practical proven use of distributed decentralized computing on a massive scale. It's already been done for 20 years, right? So we're just adding a much better layer on top of this existing robust technology, and by making it more accessible both to the providers of computing resources and also the users that need the resource, we hope to create a lot more liquidity in the space. And Eric might want to talk a little bit more in detail on that, because Eric is like, he's more intimately familiar with the problem himself as a researcher and a scientist himself. So,
well, in my opinion, it is a problem. I do want to mention that it's nice to be in a community where there are a lot of other large companies that are involved with solving the problem of what needs to happen in order for anonymous computation to be able to take place on a local machine that like any random person in the entire world is the proprietor of. And I have seen a few examples of anonymous computation, like ZK snark type things that exist, where it's like a sort of a trustless algebra kind of thing. Like, basically, I think the machine code that would be distributed from one computer to another computer is already like obfuscated in a way. But if any like parameters of that code in the algebra are exposed to the system, then who knows what sort of information it could be exposing, like what statistics or keys or whatever become available. And I think that's what these anonymous algebra systems try to solve, is like figuring out how to do exactly what John was saying is a problem in a trustless way.
Yeah, I mean, there are solutions to this security problem. However, they are fairly immature. So it's a very, very hard technical problem to solve. And we think that the more important problem to solve today is the kind of community side of things. So like if you get a big community of people that believe in something, the technology just kind of follows behind that. So, the technology is called secure multi-party computation, and also hardware enclaves. So the physical processor has a specific chip in it where computation can be done in a way that you literally have to solder something onto the CPU in order to gain access to. So it's a little harder to so
it is.
So basically, some very, very smart people are working on that technology, and we're focusing on the kind of publicly accessible, community-driven projects because we think that that's the most important thing to focus on right now.
For sure. Well, we've kind of hit about an hour mark here, guys, and it's been a really good conversation. I am going to make sure either myself or you guys, I'm going to post the notes down below. But listen, like, no, this isn't me. Like, I'm not getting paid for this. I'm not like, whatever. I'm here and I'm talking to John. I'm talking to his boys because I believe in what you guys are doing. I think you're bringing blockchain to the people. I think you're finding easy ways for people to help solve complex problems. And John, I've liked you since day one. I now officially like your team. I understand what you're doing. I understand the direction that you're going to. And it's an absolute pleasure every time I get a few minutes to sit down and just talk to you guys. But before we go, I'm going to ask at least the guys who are on the stream, most influential or favorite book that you ever read, because that was the last question that we got before we signed off.
Oh, that's an interesting question. It's not pertinent to what it's pertinent in some ways, but I read the book Flatland and Sphereland when I was younger, and it's like an old sci-fi book, or it's like science. It's basically a way to explain the curvature of the universe using an analogy of 2D society, like a society of shapes living on a 2D plane that meet a sphere from 3D space. And to a two-dimensional being, a sphere just looks like an expanding circle as the sphere like passes through their realm. And there's like a caste system based on how many sides each shape is. So like the lower caste has less sides, and the more sides you have, the upper as you move up in the echelon of society. So very interesting read. Really opened my mind to thinking about space in different ways and perception, right? So
yeah, absolutely. Dan says my head hurts. I love it. Mine, I'm gonna blurt mine out just because whatever. But Noam Chomsky, Manufacturing Consent. Read that book. It's an eye opener and it's bang on, as well as Brave New World. But I want to know what about you guys. Let's start with Eric. Most influential book you ever read?
I read Dune by Frank Herbert, and I really like that book. Yeah. I just like the philosophy. It's cool.
Agreed. I've read a lot of Ender's Game books, anything about Orson Scott Card too. I've read a lot of his stuff. I talk too much. Luke, you.
Probably the answer isn't too controversial, but like my sophomore year of college, I read Atlas Shrugged, which I definitely disagree with some of the things the author said now, after like a lot more thinking about things. But I definitely was way into it when I was reading it, and and I really think blockchain can make capitalism closer to theory. It's practice. The practice closer to theory.
I love it, guys. Look,
I also knew Eric said June.
Classic. It was a good book. Guys, thank you so much for joining me today. I love every time I get to sit down with you. And, I love what's happening with Boid. I'm feeling like probably Trybe is going to be doing some stuff with Boid in the near future. I understand the mission. I get the mission. I don't understand a lot of the technical stuff, but if you want something simplified into a sentence, radius, I'm your man. So thanks so much for sitting down with me, guys. Love what you're doing. Love the team. Look forward to hearing everything new from Boid. And stay tuned for Boid, and stay tuned for Boid on Trybe for a bunch of new info. And if you're not already in their Telegram group, head over and join. I'll make sure we post that below.
Awesome. Really appreciate it, Matt.
Pleasure, man. We'll see you guys soon.
See ya.
Bye, guys.
Thanks to everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.